Hello, welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. I'm your host, Tamara Caulder Richardson, a 6-time near-death experiencer, an evidential medium, and afterlife speaker. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to get alerts. And we have multiple shows that come up through the month, so make sure you get alerts. And like and make comments. We'd love to hear feedback from you. And also consider our membership perks. Anything that you can do to donate to this channel is very much so appreciated. And thanks for participating. Now, for our guest tonight, we're having a special UFO edition and really a month long of this. I want to welcome our guest tonight, and that would be Kathleen Marden. She is a well-known UFO researcher, lecturer, and author, and also the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, which is the well-known UFO case. She has been in many TV productions that you've probably seen in documentaries, such as Mysteries at the Museum, Alien Abduction, A True Story, The Travis Walton Story, Darkening Sky. She's been on so many National Geographic, Destination America, Science and Travel channels. She has multiple books out, and her latest, which is captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, which she is going to highlight in part 2, just on that story and the updates that's been found. So I want to invite her on the show and thank her with a warm welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Oh, you are so welcome. Well, gosh, I wanted to first talk about your interest and how you got interested in this whole UFO topic. Did it start with your aunt, or was it before that?
It started with my Aunt Betty Hill, and I had absolutely no background in UFOs or flying saucers, as they were called in those days.
That's true.
I was 13 years old
Wow.
when I arrived home from school in the afternoon, and my mother was on the telephone having a conversation with Betty. And so I overheard what my mother was saying. When she hung up the phone, she told me that Betty and Barney had a close-up sighting of a flying saucer the previous evening when they were returning home from a vacation trip, and that Betty was concerned that they might have been contaminated because the craft was so close to them.
Wow. Wow, the radiation and so forth. Wow. And plus it must have been a big shock. So did your aunt call your mom first? Was she the first person she called?
Yes, she was.
Wow. Wow. Well, I don't want to get too much into that because I know we're going to do that part 2, but I do want to, I just think this picture is so cute. I will say that is an adorable picture. And is that them going on the trip before this happened, or?
I suspect that picture was taken on the day they were married in 1960. But
so cute.
I thought it was a very good photograph to use of the two of them preparing for a vacation.
Isn't that cute? I mean, you can tell they're just such young kids, you know, so happy.
Mm-hmm.
That is so precious. So I want to focus basically on, and again, this is an amazing story, but focus on your career with the UFO phenomenon and your research and so many people that you've met that are abductees. So how did this take root? This happened when you were 13. Did you immediately find a fascination with it, or was it out of concern? How did it all start?
Well, I witnessed the unfolding of the event that my aunt and uncle had. Within 2 days of that telephone conversation, my family drove to Betty's and Barney's house. It was about 20 miles from my childhood home. And we spoke with Betty then. We saw some of the physical evidence, the watches that were no longer running after that night, the spots, very shiny spots on the trunk of the vehicle that were all about the size of quarters or $50, and that caused a compass needle to rotate, meaning that it was magnetized. There were, later I found out about Betty's dress. I don't recall learning about it on that particular day. I knew that my Uncle Barney was unusually quiet that day. My father sat quietly with him. Barney was very gregarious, and we always looked forward to seeing him. He paid a lot of attention to us, and he was a good role model. So, but unfortunately, we couldn't speak with him that day because he was expecting a phone call from Pease Air Force Base. He and my aunt the previous day had filed a Project Blue Book report as the result of a directive given by my mother and from actually the Newton, New Hampshire Police Department. The police chief, former police chief, was my father's best friend, and my father had spoken with him. So that was the beginning of it. I saw this unfold. Betty's curiosity, Barney just wanting to forget about all of it, knowing that no good could come of ever telling anyone. Betty called my mother. They told family members and close friends. And of course, they made the report to the Air Force and also to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. But this case was confidential. I met most of the scientists who investigated the case over many years, and I was impressed by them. Many of them had PhDs, they were scientists, and I thought in the back of my mind that maybe one day I would want to do that as well. But I went on, finishing high school. Betty and Barney again were role models to me because I was involved in student government and was invited to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration. And I accompanied Betty and Barney to the inauguration in 1965, before any of this information was public. Then, later in that year, I witnessed my aunt and uncle's reaction when a violation of confidentiality carried their story to the public. And as a close family member who was empathetic toward them, I felt the pain as well. And, feeling frantic. What do we do now? Where do we go now? And as a family, we decided that it would be good for Betty and Barney to go public with their story. Since it was already made public, they should at least make a statement.
I got it. And probably for safety purpose and to calm things down a bit. I got it. So that's how all that started spinning off. Now, what about as this unfolded? I know there's a whole story there we'll get to in part 2. How did what happened with Kathleen's life? I mean, you grew up.
Yes, I was a good student. I went on to the University of New Hampshire and studied English. I thought that I would want to become a journalist. But my Aunt Betty said to me, forget it, Kathy, become a social worker. That will give you a good position with benefits and you'll be employable. And so I decided that I would follow her advice. But I was very much interested in research. So I studied mostly sociology, psychology, social psychology, biological sciences, the philosophy of science, a lot of philosophy classes to be well-rounded. And I was very interested in becoming a psychiatric social worker. And that interest had to do with all of the attention that my aunt and uncle were receiving and Dr. Benjamin Simon's analysis and participation in all of this. He was the neuropsychiatrist who treated them because they had developed amnesia for a 2-hour period of time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it was really the desire to really help as an outcome from this. So now I know you were involved with MUFON.
I joined the Mutual UFO Network in 1991. I was involved in this prior to that, but I joined the Mutual UFO Network because I wanted formal training in how to investigate an abduction case. So I did that. I was the director of field investigator training for 10 years, and then I just became a journal subscriber while I was investigating Betty's and Barney's case and working on other cases as well. And I began writing my book on my findings on Betty and Barney, doing a lot of research dating back to 1990, actually probably the late 1980s, where I investigated the case after I had my training. My husband and I drove the entire route that Betty and Barney traveled during their vacation. Betty and I traveled the close encounter route time and time again, and I tape recorded her statements. My husband and I did as well. I played devil's advocate with Betty, attempting to puncture the story, to find a prosaic explanation. I had all of the archival collection of from Betty and Barney, and I'm the trustee of Betty's estate. And also, I transcribed the hypnosis tapes with Dr. Benjamin Simon and did a comparative analysis of Betty's and Barney's statements from the very beginning of their trip all the way through until they arrived home. So that was an enormous amount of work, but I thought that it was extraordinarily important to compare the comparative analysis with a series of dreams that Betty had when she returned home.
Which probably were not all dreams. It was leaking through. So wow. So 10 years. So you were with MUFON on the groundwork. I didn't realize that. So that really gave you your firm investigative skills on this. And then at what point you became a hypnotherapist? At what point did you start having your own clientele? Because I know that you do the forensic hypnosis and the quantum healing hypnosis. When did that occur?
Let me say, dating back to the 1990s. Again, I spent a summer at the University of New Hampshire on a small grant to study all of the academic studies that had been done on hypnosis. So I approached this from an academic point of view and wrote a major paper on that. Then, after I did that, I decided to undergo formal training to become a hypnotist, hypnotherapist in New Hampshire. And I did this, I believe it was around 2007. And so I did that for a while, and I wasn't charging for my services. I was just helping people. But then I also studied under Dolores Cannon and her daughter for the quantum healing hypnosis technique, and have spent fewer years doing that. But I like the technique itself. It's very gentle and positive and reassuring, and it helps experiencers to move through the process without a lot of fear and anxiety.
Right. I have seen recordings of that technique, and it is very gentle, and it is different than other types of hypnosis. Not that I know a lot about that. I've done a lot of regression in past life, but even near-death experiencers need that from time to time. And I think we were talking pre-show that there is some commonalities, you said, with near-death experiencers that might have alien abductions or alien or interdimensional communication. So maybe talk about the near-death experiencers and the commonality. I find that interesting. Is it just because they're open that they're a signal, or why do you think that is?
Well, both free, the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters, on which I was on the board of directors and a research consultant on their study, and the study that we did when I was the director of the Mutual UFO Networks Experiencer Research Team, did a 3-year study. So this was very extensive. To date, we have over 5,000 participants if you combine both of those studies. So what we discovered is that in terms of near-death experiencers, the abductees had a higher percentage than even just the plain experiencers in the study. The abductees were identified by the American Personality Inventory, which Dr. Don Sedendary from McGill University administered to MUFON's group. And 55% had near-death experiences. Among all of the participants, it was 44%, so still highly significant.
Really high.
Yes. We only asked if they were near-death experiencers, and we were looking for individuals who were actually being taken to craft. Many of the people who participated were invited to take part in this study by the members of the experiencer research team who were speaking with them non-judgmentally and confidentially.
Why do you think that is?
You know, I did think for a long time that perhaps experiencers of ET contact were taken into a higher dimension when they went to craft. And that in doing that, their soul sort of separated from the body, and they had a near-death experience and developed all of the characteristics of near-death experiencers. I do know that there was a major study done on the Omega 1 and 2 studies, and then the Omega 3 study as well, on near-death experiencers, and UFO abductees is what they were looking for in that time frame. I don't like the word abductee, but we have to use it, I guess.
We can use another word.
So anyway, the research studies that have been done have indicated that experiencers of ET contact, or what they believe is ET contact, have the same characteristics as near-death experiencers, yet there's one difference.
Okay.
Those who have ET contact have a higher level of trauma. So that was the one difference that was identified.
I could see that. So, and then what about, is it the other way around? Because I'm very involved with the near-death experience community, and I'm finding a lot of them have had ET experiences, whether they're taken away, whether they're communicating, and whatever that is. My thoughts on that from a near-death experience perspective is that they're going to the higher realms. They did that when they separated somehow. You know, we have several etheric bodies, and they were astral traveling at the very least. We don't know what realm. Maybe some near-death experiencers just stay in the hospital, but some go to the higher realms. And I think some of these higher level beings, that's where they are. At least you're passing through. And I know that this is, boy, it's difficult to, encapsulate different universes and solar systems and different types of species and aliens. But I'll just say various realms. And I think that's, they open a door. They're a portal. They open a door, and that's never really a shut. And I think that's kind of what happened to me, but probably what happened to a lot of others. That's my thoughts on that.
I agree that I believe that they do open a pathway or a portal. And this is the reason why so many experiencers of ET contact have other dimensional beings coming in to their physical environment too. So it's not just extraterrestrials, but it might be people who are in their own family but deceased, or even other maybe human entities who are interdimensional.
That makes sense. Okay, so this is interesting. So you're saying, okay, so the ET, I know you don't want to call them abductees, but I don't know a better word unless you do.
Right.
Okay.
We separated them into abductees and experiencers in our studies, so I guess we have to use that word.
For now. And so you've got the people that have had the actual, that were taken away, that ETs, and then you're saying that they are similar to the NDEers, say over here, that they separated from their body, but they're also, afterwards, they may get communication not just from aliens, but from spirit loved ones that have crossed over to whatever the heavenly realms. And then you're saying you've got the NDEers that have crossed over, many come back with mediumistic abilities that now are talking with maybe the, ET communication, and some have had, are abductees too. I've talked to them. So there is interesting a crossover, the commonality that, I can see, this is just that my gut feeling on this is they both tapped into some type of other portal, other dimension. They tapped into something that's similar,
Yes.
even though they got there on two different highways. But that's what it seems like.
Yeah, they do. And they undergo a transformation where they perceive of the world differently than they had previously. They're more highly spiritual. They become psychic or intuitive. They become empathic. So they can have visions and even be in communication with extraterrestrials, I guess, that they can feel but not see, and can communicate with telepathically.
Right. That makes sense. And so it's just the limitations of our mind, so much of that. What about, I know that some of the crafts, they talk about radiation, or some that have been on the crafts. Do they, is it some, do they, we'll see, use the word abductees again, but when they return, do they interact with energy or electrical things? I know a lot of NDEers do. Is it a similar thing?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That's something that is very common among experiencers of ET contact, that they will cause malfunctioning of the electrical systems in their homes. I wrote about this in the case of Jenny Henderson in my book, The Alien Abduction Files with Denise Stoner. And after their experience where her family was taken, she and her children set off many things. She turned on the light and the light bulb blew out. She turned on her hairdryer, the hairdryer blew out. She used the electric mixer, it blew out. She walked by her son's computer game, like a little game sitting on the kitchen counter, and it turned on and started working. She was working on her job with a computer, and the entire file disappeared when she became frustrated. So again, over and over, these sorts of things have occurred with experiencers.
This is really fascinating. I've heard many stories where the computer, I have a good friend who's a two-time NDEer, and she works for a corporation, and she went through a couple laptops within 10 days, and she was afraid she was going to get fired. So I used to think it was my cheap batteries, but I could not keep clocks on. I've got them everywhere because they keep, when one craps out, I've got other ones. My mom would blame it on, did you buy those batteries at the dollar store? I said, I don't know. I kept blaming it on the dollar store for years. So it must have something to do with on the body, the etheric body, or whatever you want to call it, whatever etheric bodies it is, whatever realm, whatever wand, how, depending how high or what have you. When it comes back into the physical body, it must have some kind of electrical correlation. So when people say you literally bring something back, I think there definitely is some type of interaction.
I did an interesting experiment with Denise Stoner. She was taken, and she had a malfunction in her insulin pump. It had been had a full battery, and it suddenly went dead. There was an electromagnetic radiation measured on her dashboard that malfunctioned in her car. And so I decided to turn on the tri-field meter, which measured magnetic, electromagnetic, and radio microwave frequency.
Is it
And
like
try those different.
is it like that, an EMF meter, or more? Is it like that? Does it measure it that way or something else?
It is a meter,
Okay.
and the needle goes up. You know, when you have a high field, it might fluctuate a little bit on a normal field. So what you do is you have to place it in the home environment, and then you have to get a reading for the magnetic activity, electrical activity in the home. And the problem we had is that we set it up and we could not get it to stop, for the needle to go down. And it wouldn't do that until both of us were at least 12 feet away from the meter. And so we were perplexed by this. Was the meter malfunctioning? What was going on? So we asked my husband, who was in another room, to come and test it. He tested it, and it behaved normally for him. But then Denise stepped in just within 12 feet of it. It spiked to the highest reading. And then I stepped in, and it spiked to the highest reading. I happened to be with her that night she was taken. And
oh my God.
and my father.
They know you. You know they know you over there. You're probably very popular. The aliens.
So, but it measured a very strong electrical field, which any electrical field is electromagnetic, 1,000 volts per meter. Wow. And it lasted for approximately 2 weeks. So, you know, if you have an implant that is working very strongly, putting out a field for a while, but then begins to decrease, then maybe that is why it lasted only for 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay. So do most of the abductees have implants?
My guess is yes. I believe that most of them have implants.
Got it. And it was funny. I was talking to a fellow. He was on my show. He admitted it after I said I didn't do it on the air or whatever, but then he admitted it later. I said, "You've been tagged on your right ear. You got a tag. You got a tagger like a little cow." And he goes, "Yes, nobody knows about that." An abduction thing. I hasn't even told you. He came clean this weekend at the Spiritual Awakenings conference, but I mean, which is fine. But so, do some people try to get that removed, and are they still active? Are they always there? And why do they really need that? I've heard, you know, I had Preston Denton on the show. He said some of the higher technologies, they don't really need to tag you. They can do it by, they already know who you are by, I guess, reading your frequency, your vibration. They kind of know. So what's the purpose for the tags, and do people have them removed?
Well, people were encouraged to have them removed by Daryl Sims and Dr. Roger Lear when he was alive. Daryl is still living. Because they thought that it would end contact. It doesn't end contact.
Okay.
And they wanted to study scientifically the characteristics of these implants, and they had highly unusual characteristics. Some would broadcast into deep space, and they discovered that they were made of crystalline materials of meteoric origin and also rare earths. But in terms of whether or not they were a tracking device, maybe they were early on. I know that the entity who spoke with my Aunt Betty said they could always find those that they wished to find. Also, I know of other reasons for having, important reasons for having these implants, because they want to monitor the health of the human body. They take tissue samples from and I'm talking about the grays mostly, take tissue samples from humans because they're concerned about environmental toxicity. And so they're measuring the body for environmental toxicity. They will also heal people, heal the experiencers that they interact with if the experiencers ask to be healed. I've worked on several cases where that has occurred. It doesn't always happen, but generally people receive just at least a little bit of help. Also, it's a communication device. And I think that it might have something to do with the human vibrational frequency.
A two-way communication device?
Yes.
So how would that, I mean, tell me more about that. How would that work?
They seem to know when an experiencer is speaking with another experiencer. The experiencers hear a very high frequency tone in their heads, which is different from tinnitus, and feel often tingling in the crown chakra. And if we get back to the studies that I've worked on, Free asked if experiencers could end their contact, would they want to do it? And I believe it was 83 or 84% who said, no, I do not want to end my experiences. It was 71% of the experiencers in MUFON's study, but 75% among the abductee group who did not want to end contact. So I think that we generally have the perception of abduction as being something that's horrifying and negative. But in our studies, we discovered that the answer is it is only that way for about 5%. And the rest...
Really? 5%?
Yes, well, 5 to 10% are having negative experiences, but that's what the media focuses on because fear sells.
Right. They do the same thing with spirit people, which are our relatives, but then they turn them into ghosts and all sorts of creepy stuff, which that's not most of the experience. So why did they want to keep their experience? They want to keep the communication. What was the reason?
There were certain benefits. Many of these individuals were later in life, 50 and above, and they were now communicating with these ETs. They were receiving benefits from them. They were being given information, and they didn't want that to end. And oftentimes they just wanted to know more. They wanted the answers.
I think at a certain point in life, you just want answers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's golden. That makes total sense to me. Wow. And like you said, if it wasn't an adversarial relationship, then why not?
Absolutely.
Now, what about the studies going back in families? How far have you found these go back?
They say that initially it was random. And then they found the experiencers that they wanted the genetic material from to work in their program. And then they began to follow family lines in an effort to save the human race in order to move us ahead on an evolutionary scale and to produce a more viable human. And this was going to be beneficial for both us and them, they said.
What about DNA? Are they in any way manipulating the DNA for a benefit to us or them?
Well, apparently they are manipulating DNA. The offspring of the early experiencers, which date back into the 30s or 40s, 1930s or 1940s, I've interviewed many experiencers who were taken in the early 1950s who had parents who also had these experiences. So it's been going on for a very long time. And these experiencers, again, have special attributes that regular humans do not have. They tend to be highly spiritual. They are not aggressive and warlike. for the most part.
Mhm.
As far as I know, they're not in prison for committing crimes
Okay.
against
So
others.
the ethics are pretty good.
I think that the non-human entities are brilliant when they have made humans empathic, because as empaths, we feel the pain of anyone that we harm or hurt. And, if everyone on this planet was empathic, we couldn't possibly go to war. We couldn't possibly harm one another intentionally.
It's beautiful. You're right, though. It's true. It's beautiful. I don't know if you've thought about it, but here, this was your aunt and uncle, and then now here you're doing the research. You're like the scribe of what's going on. If these are higher level beings, I mean, they probably knew this was going to happen too, that you would be the scribe, that you were going to record what is happening for those seeking that would find it.
Yes. Yes, I think so. I think that we all have a purpose and an intention. And I, at this point, am in constant contact with these higher entities. And when I was talking to you, for example, I was hearing that sound in my head and feeling the crown chakra tingling.
So what's interesting, I'm going to go here for a minute because maybe you can decode this, but what is this whole signal thing that's supposed to be happening? And, of course, we're going through this great, whatever they say, awakening in the planet, higher vibration. But I literally was on a group meditation. A friend in South Africa said, would you like to be on? I was like, sure. I didn't know I'd be on the camera because I had no makeup on or anything. I literally, everyone could hear a transmission coming through. Hear it at night sometimes, and it'll be, it may sound strange to people. It's comforting to me.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like that's my home, real home. So I feel comforted.
I feel comforted by this as well. It's a highly positive experience. And I have to say that early on, when I was a teenager and in my 20s and 30s, I was terrified. But the more I learned, the more I moved forward toward the higher dimensional part of all of this, the more pleased I was to have access to this other realm outside the human realm.
So this was happening to you that early, really? Were you hearing the code back then, or is that something new, or is it enhanced?
I was not. I had an experience when I was 17 years old. My Aunt Betty was working with a team of scientists who were giving her a script to read. And every night she would go onto her back porch and attempt to send messages to these ETs to show their craft in a certain area. She was attempting to have them land on my grandparents' farm.
Oh my goodness.
I grew up across the street from my grandparents. And in 1966, it was April of 1966, a craft did land. It was observed by two people. My mother and I had memories of being on that craft from that time frame, but I was never allowed to speak about it. I was terrified. It had a huge impact on my life, and I was taken periodically throughout my lifetime.
Okay. Were they the grays as we know it?
Yes, they were a species of grays. They were not the skinny little large-headed.
I got it. So they weren't like the earrings, these guys. They were more like, I think it's this one, right?
That was more the way that the leader and the examiner, that the appearance of the leader and the examiner. Okay. The smaller ones who are just the assistants and the guards look more like the stereotypic image that you showed earlier.
Okay. Do you know what they are?
all I can tell you is that they have an Asian appearance, but
Oh, got it.
not Asian. Um, maybe they're from the future. Of course, with Betty and Barney, there was a star map that Betty was shown on the craft. Dr. Simon suggested that she should go home and draw it if she could remember it accurately, and it didn't bother her too much. She did, and it was published in the first book that was ever written about their case. And that ended up being the subject of a very long-term research project by a brilliant woman, an amateur astronomer from Ohio. And then my co-author on 3 books, Stanton Friedman,
Yes.
came into the
There
scene.
you are. There you
Yes,
are.
because he is the scientist who found other scientists to vet Marjorie Fish's work. And those who vetted it stated that it was accurate. So
Here you are doing
here
research.
we are at the American Philosophical Society doing research for our book,
Wow.
Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers.
Wow. God bless him. I know he passed in 2019, but this must be a wonderful memory here.
It is a wonderful memory. We visited the American Philosophical Society twice together and numerous times by myself and with my friend Jennifer Stein.
And then we've got here, this is you said it was a cast model made of similar to what your aunt and uncle saw, which sounds like similar to one of them you saw.
Yes, it is very similar to what I saw as well. The brow ridge, kind of wrinkles under the eyes, just the tiny nose, a slit for a mouth, flat face, broad cheeks. No, completely hairless from as far as I know. No external appendage for the ears.
No ears.
And telepathic communication.
And do you think these were the leaders higher ranked than the Greys?
Yes. Yes, I know that they were because I've had experience with both groups.
So would you say the Greys are more of the worker bees?
That's what I would say. I'm not even certain that they have their own personalities. They move only when instructed to do so. And so I suspect that they could be cyborgs or, biorobotic, something.
Drone, some kind of something like this.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Whereas the ones with the more important functions, such as the escorts and the physicians, the scientists from their group, seem to be sentient beings.
Got it. Now, were any of them, have you seen any of them that were reptilian-like or just the Asian types?
I have not personally seen any reptilian types, no.
I've heard they're shapeshifters, are they?
That's a good question. I don't think they're shapeshifters. I suspect that they create this image in the human mind so that the human experiencer will not be as frightened. So the child might see a large bunny or a firefighter or a police officer, something that they can associate with a positive image. The adults oftentimes will see very large owls or very large rabbits or let me think, a deer. A herd of deer that end up transforming then into these little grays.
It's funny. There used to be a TV show called People of Earth, and I used to absolutely love that show. It went off, and that was the common thing they would show with these abductees that would get together, was the owl or the deer. And in fact, that does come up with things. So that's interesting.
Yes, I've investigated many cases that have both of those.
Isn't that, and why is that? Is that just a memory they implant in beforehand?
I believe so, that when that is occurring, they say that it is in order not to frighten the human, because they thought the
Okay.
human would be frightened by their appearance.
Got it. Oh, that makes sense. So now, as you've been doing this, can you, because you've had multiple experiences, not only with, aliens about being on crafts and not being on crafts and just communication. Can you sense when there's another person that communicates? Because I can do that within the years. I can do that with people. I know. And sometimes they don't even know they've had anything because I can tell it's a frequency.
Yes, I have noticed that when I go to conferences, for example, I can identify those people because there's a very strong tingling, full body tingling sensation
Yes.
near them. Yes.
You get it too. Okay, got it.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I do get it with you too. I get it. It feels like ripples. It feels like goosebumps, but really positive ones.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everywhere. And it's just a higher vibration thing. I guess that's the whole point of the electrical current being changed. So let's go back. Gosh, there's so much to cover. It's so exciting. So what is that code that I've been hearing? What is that? It's a transmission. It feels like it's a language. But it's more than that. It's almost like a healing signal, but it's like informational knowledge too. Like a download is what I get. Why, and what do you get? What do you make of it?
Well, I wish that I could have communication at will, but oftentimes I hear the sounds, I feel the sensation, but it's not translating into anything that I can understand. I've also had downloads of information where I oftentimes have to write it down
Me too.
immediately,
Yeah.
and it's coming very, very rapidly. So
Yeah.
I've had that happen, and I've been able to understand it then because I'm actually having the telepathic contact.
Is it a certain time or day?
No, I don't know when it's going to come. I've had a time when I was writing a book and I sensed a non-human standing next to me, very, very strong electromagnetic, I guess, experience through my body. And I almost went into a trance, I think, and altered what I was writing in the book because I was told that my understanding of this was incorrect. And so
That's what I mean. You're their scribe. You're their girl. I mean, they know. It's interesting. I don't understand all the technology and the mechanisms, but I feel sure they know who we are and what we're doing. And it seems like a gentle influence. It doesn't seem like a direct influence that I'm still trying to figure out. I think that there's a bigger plan than that.
I suspect that there is. I have been told by them that I am a carrier of information from them to humanity.
And I would also agree. It's funny. I just wonder, after speaking to especially Craig Campabasso, how many people are really human here? Because how would we really know our true origin? Earth is really a relatively young planet, and so I make a joke that if you're visited by aliens, they could just be your relatives. I mean, it could just be right, because right now we're taking the form of a human being, but of course the soul goes on and lives forever. There's probably so many of us that are really not from here in the first place that that we have forgotten, and that might be part of the mission and the task that we agreed to.
That's true. And Dolores Cannon, who did hypnosis over a 40-year period, started out developing quantum healing hypnosis as a near-death experience therapist, and then moved on to experiencers as well. And what she said, and I found this to be true as well, is that under hypnosis, these individuals state that they were extraterrestrials in another time, and they did reincarnate into a human body in order to carry out this mission on planet Earth. And this mission is in order to raise the vibration. I have been told by the ETs that, and many other people too, not just me, but they say that our spiritual development is out of sync with our technological progress. And as a result of this, we could cause great damage to this planet and to the human race. We could become extinct. And so by raising the human vibration, it's an effort to save humans. And by raising that vibration, then humans are no longer going to do bad things to one another.
Now, I've been told, I don't know, I've been told that we've been put here as an experiment, hoping that from high vibration to very low vibration, you might want to call them dark or evil, that we find a way, to get along. I see it a different way. I see that we're raising the vibration here to one of love and kindness and unity to everyone, so that the really bad people, the bullies, that they're done. I had a fellow on here, really fascinating, Sergio Magnaya, who wrote the Toltec prophecies, and he explained about the Palladians, has been working with the Toltecs and the Aztecs for a long time, and about that this was prophesized, that's he said that we're raising the energy, and there will be the people that want pain and suffering, that, and others that want love and positivity, all the things that beauty, that they're just going to, he said, they're just going to die. They're just going to die. He said, the people that are naysayers, bad, whatever. And I said, why? And he said, because the vibration will be so high that their organs will not match and they'll just die. And I was like, okay.
Well, Dolores Cannon always said that we would have two Earths. One of those would be of the lower vibration, but the other would be of the higher vibration. So I have not been told specifically about that, but I have to trust Dolores Cannon.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I haven't heard that perspective. When I ask about that, they said that the dark side doesn't pertain to you, so it doesn't. You don't need to ask. And I was like, okay, then. I'm like, all right. So yeah. So hopefully, and it's interesting. I am seeing a lot of, if you want to call them light workers, all different kinds of people, from naturopath medicines to people working with essential oils, healers. People giving, messages, whatever that may be, are really stepping forward. And it's interesting that so many of these kinds of people, including myself, are usually lone wolves, but not anymore. They're starting to kind of come together and hold hands all around the world. So there's quite a movement. And I'm also seeing a lot of people, I guess the proper word here is activated, that they're remembering what their mission is to bring more love here.
Yes. And in the UFO community, more and more people are doing CE5 experiments where they meditate and try to call in the ETs and craft. And oftentimes they will come. And this is happening all over the world to try to raise the level of communication, raise the vibration around the world. So I think we're all working toward the same goal.
Yeah, and it's really important. I feel a great sense of urgency. I've quite honestly never felt in my life that this is important to spread this love flow. And it's an energy thing. It's a oneness and mindness. And I'm also seeing energetic gold lines across the planet that we're creating. Not only, I don't think they're necessarily transportation lines necessarily. I don't think but I think it's like mending, it's like love energy through the planet, building these beautiful grids of love and kindness. So there's something energetically going on by the signal being sent out. But I feel it's like this, a bit of communication with the ETs and so forth. They are watching, they are observing, especially the higher level ones. And, they do want our best interest at heart, which is also affiliated with them. But I think that if you're receptive to it, to a kind word or guidance, I really don't see, if you're receptive, is the key word. I don't see why in the world why they wouldn't. I think it's just that easy, just like any other communication in life. If someone wants to talk to you and you want to talk to them, then communication is set forth. So I think it's a mindset, and I think more people are open to this.
Yes, and I do caution experiencers or people who want to speak with these non-humans to do this with someone who is having positive contact, because
Yeah.
I do know of individuals who have been contacted by lower level
Ooh, so
entities.
you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and then they end up with attachments that have to be
Ew.
removed, and
Good point.
it's not good.
It's true. Yeah. And the darker entities that could be alien, or could be, the D word, we say that one. But yeah, they could be attachments. Is true. Well, I think that if it's something that someone naturally does, like I certainly wasn't looking for this, and it's very positive, very vibration. Anytime it's a message of love, it can't be and loving one another. It can't be a bad thing. So
Right.
what do you think about, I'm curious, before we end this segment, I wanted to get your feedback. What do you think about all this that's going to be released about all the UFOs, and the government's been hiding it? Everybody can't wait for it to come out. I mean, don't we kind of know about this anyway? Don't we already know they've been here? I mean, it was like 3 months ago, they were like in my neighborhood, like a fleet of 12. And the other day I was looking out, and I'm like, why is that star here? But now it's over there. I mean, I was looking, I was like, it seems like it's moving. And I'm going, well, I don't know, maybe it's something. But I had the distinct feeling that it knew that I was watching it.
Well,
And no fear, though. It wasn't a fearful thing. It didn't fear. There was no fear attached to that at all, by the way.
Stanton Friedman and I have done an extensive search of the U.S. government records and the history of government involvement in their understanding of UFOs, the study of UFOs, major studies, etc. And dating back to 1946, the government studied this. They said the same thing that they're saying now. It is unusual. It doesn't belong to us. Does it belong to some other country on this planet? They knew back in 1946 that these craft could outfly anything on Earth, that they had special properties. They're saying the same thing now. In 1952, Major General John Alexander Samford talked about how this goes back to biblical times, that they generally come about once in a century. They were here during the 19th century. They're back on the 20th century. They're staying. And now here we are in the 21st century, and they're still here. They have not harmed anyone. They'll say that they're not, the government will say they're not, we do not believe they're a threat to national security,
Right.
Because they haven't harmed anyone, unless somebody wants to spin it, to develop more weapons, to develop more Star Wars systems. And I hope that doesn't happen. But,
Right.
I'm not holding my breath that there will be disclosure to the American public, because the government's job is to create stability and in the general population, in the body politic. And whenever there is any question about that, then they will launch a cover-up. I fear that they're going to launch another cover-up and go back to spreading disinformation and attacking people who are speaking publicly about this, people who have experienced this themselves. That's what I fear.
Right. They're going to do what they always have. So, people are all excited that, I'm like, do we really need that? We've seen things over the years. People have done research. Either at this point, this is a phenomenon that's real or not. So I'm more like you. I do feel that, there's a lot of lies behind that. And it is to, make sure everything's okay. There's not mass hysteria and so forth. But I would think if there was a technology that was used that was alien technology, they might want to get involved then to stop it, because they're like taking something that's really not there. So maybe that that would be the case.
Well, this
Now,
would be a secret program, because you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies, and they would want to be ahead of the enemy. So, dating back to 1954, they communicated with the government. There's an article on my website at kathleen-marden.com about that. So it's a long article. But they were communicating with the federal government. They offered to share technology back then, but they said that they would not favor one country over another. Whatever they shared would go to all countries. And on an earth where nationalism is the name of the game and tribal warfare, we weren't interested.
got it. Wasn't the during the Eisenhower times?
Yes.
Yeah,
it was.
I get there is more of that, but it's interesting because we know that they speak to telepathic, right? So they know who we are. It was funny because I was asking President, and I said, "How do they know who we are?" And he goes, "Oh, they know." I said, "Well, what do they look for?" And he said, "Artists, psychics, people that are open-minded, mediums." But he said they know us through our vibration. So if they know us by our thoughts, just like spirit people, our family, in the angelic heavenly realms, what are our family? They know everything that's the playbook anyway. They it's not like the government can hide anything from them. They don't need to have a communication. They already know what's in their head. So yeah, this is so fascinating. Look, I want to tell people how to, I've got some books here. I know we showed one. I've got 5 books. I just wanted you to briefly mention, this is the one with Denise Stoner where you have accounts of her experiences, correct?
True. And our first study of commonalities among experiencers is in that book. The Jenny Henderson case that I spoke of is there, along with other cases that I investigated that I thought were worthy of putting in the book.
Fascinating. And let's go to the next book you want to talk about. I've got 5 here. I want people to see these. Would it be
Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, is a book that I wrote for experiencers. It's a comprehensive guide to contact, but it not only for experiencers, but anyone who is interested in this topic. I've written about some of my very important cases, and even there's a chapter on developing psychically, a chapter on lower vibrational entities, how to avoid that, and what to do if you're having contact with them as well. So quite a lot of, it's a comprehensive guide, a lot of information.
But that is, I'd like to stay in the love vibration, but that's a real thing. That's why discernment. Yeah, I mean, what I've heard with the other planets, where the Earth is a lower vibration, closer to, as we call it, the demonic realm. I'm like, great. So you're right. We need to keep it. We need to make sure we keep it positive because of that.
Yes. Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers was written based upon years of research that Stanton and I did. And on the photograph that you showed of ours at the National Philosophical Society, yes, we were doing research there. We've done a lot of research in physical archives, Stanton more than I did. And all of that combined for this book on the history of government involvement on the investigation of UFOs, their major studies, the disinformants, etc.
Wow. I got to dive into that one next. That one, I haven't read that. That looks great. Science Was Wrong.
Well, Stanton and I, this was our second book. We each wrote half of it. And it is, as it says, startling truths about cures, theories, and inventions they declared impossible, which means the mainstream scientists of the time. There's also a section on the frontiers of science where we talk about experiments that have been done on telepathy, on ESP, There's a chapter on UFOs and another chapter on contact with non-human entities.
Wow. Beautiful. Okay, let me get this one. And then, of course, we don't want to forget Captured.
Yes, well, that book was our first published book, but now we have released the 60th anniversary edition of Captured with new updates that have been done in scientific experiments and new insights that I have as well that I didn't have in the year 2007 when the first book was published.
Wow. Well, and we're going to hear more about that on part 2, where you're going to go more into the actual story. And I loved hearing about the family and how they reacted to it as well. So I want to be able to give the information that people can get a hold of you. I know that it's all below. And you offer private consulting as well as hypnosis, but you were telling me that the hypnosis has to be done. I'm looking for my link here. It has to be done in person. And maybe you could explain the traditional forensic hypnosis technique versus the quantum healing hypnosis technique and what's involved if someone's interested.
Yes, I do have an article on my website about the hypnosis that I offer, but then for anyone who wants to inquire, I will send them the specific information that they're looking for.
Okay, perfect. And I love what you said earlier, that this is all done very gentle. This is very gentle, that they can go over anything, that if it's horrific or whatever comes out, that is done with love and care. So
Yes.
Thank you so much. I mean, you are just a wealth of information. We just brushed over just a few things, and it was just so powerful. And I thank you so much for being on the Seeking Heaven channel and continue to spreading this information and being a divine scribe. I like that.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.